The sterile smell of disinfectant hung heavy in the maternity ward, mixing with the quiet cries of newborns and the hushed footsteps of nurses moving from room to room. Alina lay pale and exhausted on the narrow hospital bed, her arms trembling as she held her baby for the first time. The joy she had imagined for this moment was there, fragile and glowing, but it was already being overshadowed by a familiar tension tightening in her chest. She knew her mother-in-law would come. She always did, uninvited, unannounced, and never empty-handed when it came to cruelty. The door swung open sharply, and there she was, Galina Ivanovna, her posture stiff, her eyes sharp, scanning the room as if she owned it. She didn't smile at the baby. She didn't ask how Alina felt. Instead, she crossed her arms and let out a cold sigh, as though the sight before her disappointed her deeply. "So," she said flatly, "you're still here." Alina swallowed hard. "I just gave birth," she whispered. "The doctors said." "I don't care what the doctors said," Galina cut in. "My son should be here, not you. This child, we'll see if it's even his." The words struck like slaps. Alina felt her eyes burn, but she refused to cry. She had cried too much already during the months of accusations, silent treatments, and whispered insults. Galina stepped closer, her voice lowering to a venomous hiss. "You should leave," she said. "As soon as you're discharged, take your things and go. You were never welcome in this family." At that moment, the baby whimpered softly, as if sensing the hostility in the room. Alina tightened her hold, her heart pounding. She wanted to scream, to tell this woman to leave her alone, but exhaustion pinned her down, stealing her strength and her voice. Then the unexpected happened. The door opened again, this time slowly. A tall man stepped inside, dressed in a dark coat, his presence immediately shifting the energy of the room. Galina froze mid-sentence. Her mouth remained slightly open, but no sound came out. "Good afternoon," the man said calmly. Alina recognized him instantly. It was Victor, her husband's estranged father. A man Galina hadn't spoken to in over 20 years. A man she had sworn never to see again. "You?" Galina finally breathed, her face draining of color. "Yes, me," Victor replied evenly. "I heard my grandson was born." Galina's confidence crumbled. She straightened her scarf nervously, suddenly unsure of herself. "You have no right to be here." Victor's eyes shifted to Alina, then to the baby. His expression softened. "I have every right," he said quietly. "And so does she." The room fell into a thick, stunned silence. Galina tried to regain control, but her words stumbled over each other. "She's trying to destroy this family," she snapped weakly. "She trapped my son." "That's enough," Victor interrupted, his voice firm but not loud. "I've watched you tear people down your entire life. You did it to me, and now you're doing it to her. It ends today." Galina stood speechless, her lips trembling. For the first time, she had no weapon left, no authority, no audience, no fear to wield. Later that same evening, across the ocean, another confrontation was unfolding under bright studio lights. Ezra Miller sat on the couch of The View, hands clasped tightly, eyes intense. What was supposed to be a routine interview had already gone off script. Joy Behar leaned forward, her tone sharp as she pressed Ezra with a question that carried more accusation than curiosity. "Don't you think," Joy said, "that your behavior reflects a pattern of irresponsibility?" Ezra's jaw tightened. "With respect," they replied, "that question assumes guilt without context." Joy raised an eyebrow. "The public deserves answers." "The public deserves truth," Ezra shot back, their voice rising. "Not simplified narratives designed to humiliate people on live television." The studio grew tense. The audience murmured. The hosts exchanged uneasy glances. Ezra leaned forward now, no longer defensive but resolute. "I came here to talk about my work," they continued, "not to be reduced to headlines. You don't get to decide who I am based on fragments of a story." Joy tried to interrupt, but Ezra didn't stop. "This is exactly how people are silenced," they said. "By authority figures who believe they're entitled to judge without listening." The producer signaled frantically from off camera, but it was too late. Ezra stood up. "I'm done," they said. "I won't be part of this." They walked off the set, leaving behind stunned hosts and a buzzing audience. The moment would go viral within minutes, praised by some, criticized by others, but unmistakably powerful. Back in the maternity ward, Victor placed a small bouquet of flowers on Alina's bedside table. "You're not alone anymore," he said gently. I won't let her chase you away. Galina said nothing. She simply turned and left, her footsteps quick and unsteady, as if she were the one being expelled. Alina looked down at her baby, tears finally slipping free, not from pain this time, but from relief. For the first time since marrying into this family, someone had stood between her and the storm. Across different worlds, under different lights, the same truth echoed: power loses its grip the moment fear disappears. Whether in a hospital room or a television studio, silence can be broken, and those who once commanded the space can be left utterly, shockingly mute. The corridor outside the maternity ward was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that made every sound feel heavier than it should. A nurse's shoes squeaked faintly against the polished floor, a newborn cried somewhere behind closed doors, and the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Inside one of the small rooms, Alina lay propped against white pillows, her body aching, her mind drifting between exhaustion and disbelief. Only hours ago, her life had split into a clear before and after. She was a mother now. She should have felt safe, protected, wrapped in warmth. Instead, a familiar dread settled in her stomach, the kind she had learned to recognize too well. The door opened without a knock. Galina Ivanovna entered as if she owned the room, her sharp gaze moving quickly from the baby to Alina's face. There was no tenderness in her expression, no curiosity, no joy. She looked like a woman inspecting a mistake. "So this is it," she said, folding her arms. "This is what caused all the trouble." Alina felt her throat tighten. She adjusted the blanket around her child, instinctively shielding the tiny face from the coldness in the room. "Please," she murmured, "lower your voice." Galina let out a short laugh. "Now you're giving me instructions. You should be thanking me I came at all." She stepped closer, her shadow falling over the bed. "I spoke to my son," she continued. "He's confused. He doesn't know what to do with you anymore." Alina's heart began to race. "Where is he?" "Not here," Galina replied sharply. "And maybe that's for the best. You've caused enough embarrassment already." The words cut deep, especially here, in a place meant for healing. Galina leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper that felt far more violent than shouting. "Once you're discharged, you leave. No visits. No drama. This child will stay with our family, and you," she gestured dismissively, "will go wherever you came from." Alina stared at her, stunned. For a moment, the room seemed to spin. She had imagined many versions of this confrontation, but none where she felt so utterly powerless. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. Crying would only feed Galina's sense of control. Then, just as Galina straightened up, ready to deliver another blow, the door opened again. This time, the air changed. A man stood in the doorway, his hair touched with gray, his face lined not with bitterness but with quiet resolve. His eyes moved slowly across the room until they rested on Galina. Recognition hit her instantly. Her confident posture collapsed, her lips parting in disbelief. "You," she whispered. "Yes," the man said calmly. "Me." Alina's breath caught. She had seen photographs, heard fragments of stories, but she never expected to see Victor in person. The man Galina had erased from family history. The man whose name was never spoken. "I heard I became a grandfather today," Victor continued, stepping inside. "I thought it was time I met my grandson." Galina's face hardened, but there was fear behind it now. "You don't belong here." Victor's gaze softened as he looked at the baby, then at Alina. "Neither did I, once," he said quietly. "But that didn't stop you from trying to control everything." Galina opened her mouth, but no words came out. She had built her power on silence, on rewriting narratives, on making others doubt themselves. Faced with someone immune to her tactics, she was suddenly small. "You will not threaten her," Victor said firmly. "Not today. Not ever again." The authority in his voice was undeniable. Galina stood frozen, then abruptly turned and left, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. The door closed softly behind her. Alina exhaled shakily, her body finally releasing the tension it had been holding for months. Victor approached the bed and set a small bag down gently. "You did nothing wrong," he said. "And you're not alone." That same evening, under glaring studio lights thousands of miles away, another silence was about to be broken. Ezra Miller sat on the set of The View, posture rigid, eyes alert. The conversation had started politely enough, but the tone shifted quickly. Joy Behar leaned forward, her voice sharp with implication rather than inquiry. People watching this, Joy said, see a pattern. Don't you think it's time you take responsibility for how you're perceived? Ezra's expression darkened. Perception isn't the same as truth. Joy pressed on. But perception matters when your actions affect others. Ezra inhaled slowly. What affects people is when media platforms turn complexity into spectacle. The audience grew quiet. One of the co-hosts shifted uncomfortably. Joy smiled thinly. So you're blaming the media now? No, Ezra replied, their voice firm. I'm asking for accountability. From you. A murmur rippled through the studio. Ezra continued, words gaining momentum. You invite people here under the pretense of conversation, then ambush them with assumptions. That's not journalism. That's intimidation. Joy attempted to interject, but Ezra raised a hand. Let me finish. The producer gestured urgently, but Ezra stood up, eyes blazing with clarity rather than anger. I won't sit here and be reduced to a headline for entertainment. Not today. They walked off the set, cameras scrambling to follow before cutting away. The room buzzed with shock. Within minutes, clips flooded social media, igniting debates, applause, outrage, and admiration all at once. Back in the hospital, Victor sat quietly beside Alina, watching the baby sleep. The chaos of the day felt distant now, like a storm that had finally passed. In two very different places, the same truth had revealed itself: authority loses its grip when it is challenged without fear. Whether it was a domineering mother-in-law or a powerful television host, the moment someone refused to be silenced, the balance shifted. And in that shift, something new was born, dignity reclaimed, voices restored, and a future no longer dictated by those who thrived on control.